Hello, everybody.
Fat Bird Finds here.
I'm Mary Beth.
And I'm Laura.
Welcome to Tales from the Put-Out Closet. This is Fat Bird Finds podcast. Thank you so much for joining along. This is the final episode of Alice in Wonderland.
I can't believe it.
We've done it in 5 episodes.
Short and sweet.
It took us a long time to get through Little Frank.
Yeah, I think it was a really brilliant idea to start with.
To do a short one?
To jump back into the podcast world with the shorter story.
Agree.
Yes.
Agree. All right, so we are going to start where we left off. I believe we left off where Alice was playing croquet with the queen. Let's see what was happening in the last page.
Oh, that was quite a chaotic scene.
Yeah, they were arguing about beheading the Cheshire Cat.
Yeah, they were arguing about how can you behead a head that doesn't have a body?
Right. This book is just bananas. So anyway, we are on chapter, I don't know what that Roman numeral is. Is that 9?
Yes.
We are on chapter 9.
Jamie's like, I finally found my copy and I've only watched the first episode. And it's almost over?
Well, it was a pretty quick read, you know. So, anyway.
Jamie gave us our little mascot here. The little Cheshire Cat. There he is up there. I wish he disappeared, like, all but his face.
Thank you guys for joining us. We would love it if you are not subscribed to the podcast channel, if you would do so and give us a thumbs up. That would be a great way to start the episode.
Yeah. And I think, you guys can chat. Like, let's give them something to chat about. Like, what their favorite scene has been so far or something like that. I think it's just a crazy story, and I'm glad everybody knows it, because if not, it would be so confusing. You just can't even follow it.
True.
Like, I feel bad because with Frank, we had whether or not we were Team Frank, and we haven't really gotten into taking sides or anything in this story.
Yeah.
Do you feel bad for Alice?
No. I think she's kind of the worst. I don't have any sympathy for her.
Why? She's just little.
I don't care how old she is. She needs to just calm down and mind her business. She's very nosy. All right, here we go. Chapter 9, The Mock Turtle's Story. You can't think how glad I am to see you again, you dear old thing, said the Duchess, as she tucked her arm affectionately into Alice's and they walked off together. Alice was very glad to find her in such a pleasant temper, and thought to herself that perhaps it was only the pepper that had made her so savage when they met in the kitchen.
Yeah, isn't the Duchess the one that had the baby and it turned into a pig and there was pepper and there was sneezing?
Yeah, that chapter was batshit crazy, for sure. When I'm a duchess, she said to herself, not in a very hopeful tone though, I won't have any pepper in my kitchen at all. Soup does very well without. Maybe it's always pepper that makes people hot-tempered, she went on, very much pleased at having found out a new kind of rule. And vinegar that makes them sour, and chamomile that makes them bitter, and a barley sugar, and such things that make children sweet-tempered. I only wish people knew that. Then they wouldn't be so stingy about it, you know. She had quite forgotten the Duchess by this time, and was a little startled when she heard her voice so close to her ear. You're thinking about something, my dear, and that makes you forget to talk. I can't tell you now just what the moral of that is, but I shall remember it in a bit. Perhaps it hasn't one, Alice ventured to remark. Tut, tut, child, said the Duchess. Everything's got a moral, if only you can find it. And she squeezed herself up closer to Alice's side as she spoke. Alice did not much like her keeping so close to her.
I wouldn't either.
First,
the way she treated that baby earlier.
First, because the Duchess was very ugly. And secondly, because she was exactly the right height to rest her chin on Alice's shoulder. And it was an uncomfortably sharp chin. However, she did not like to be rude, so she bore it as well she could. So she's just letting this...
Well, see, she said she
person...
doesn't like to be rude.
Oh, come now. Come on, Alice. The game's going on rather better now, she said, by the way of keeping up the conversation a little. 'Tis so, said the Duchess, and the moral of that is, oh, 'tis love that makes the world go round. Somebody said, Alice whispered, that it is done by everybody minding their own business. Ah, well, it means much the same thing, said the Duchess, digging her sharp little chin into Alice's shoulder as she added, and the moral of that is, take care of the sense and the sounds will take care of themselves. How fond she is of finding morals in things, Alice thought to herself. I dare say you're wondering why I don't put my arm around your waist, the Duchess said after a pause. The reason is that I'm doubtful about the temper of your flamingo. Shall I try the experiment? He might bite, Alice cautiously replied, not feeling at all anxious to have the experiment tried. Very true, said the Duchess. Flamingos and mustard both bite. And the moral of that is, birds of a feather flock together.
Oh. Hey, while you're paused. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
I
was just noticing someone wanted to know, the name of this is The Mock Turtle Story, and they wanted to know what mock turtle meant. And I just thought before you got to it, I would just tell them really quick. Okay, so the mock turtle is a fictional character from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. The character's name is derived from mock turtle soup, a popular 18th and 19th century dish that was a cheaper alternative to turtle soup. The mock turtle is known for crying, sighing, and dramatic pauses while telling his story of once being a real turtle.
Interesting.
Yeah, and here he is.
Very interesting. I'm going to read that last sentence again.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Very true, said the Duchess. Flamingos and mustard both bite, and the moral of that is, birds of a feather flock together. Only mustard isn't a bird, Alice remarked. Right, as usual, said the Duchess. What a clear way you have of putting things.
I don't like the Duchess. I wonder who the Duchess is like representing in Alice's life. That's what I keep wondering about in this whole story. Because, she's dreaming. So, I mean, her brain is like pulling these people from somewhere.
I don't know. It's a mineral, I think, said Alice. Of course it is, said the Duchess, who seemed ready to agree to everything Alice said. There's a large mustard mine near here. And the moral of that is, the more there is of mine, the less there is of yours. Oh, I know, exclaimed Alice, who had not attended to this last remark. It's a vegetable. It doesn't look like one, but it is. I quite agree with you, said the Duchess. And the moral of that is, be what you would seem to be, or if you'd like it put more simply, never imagine yourself not to be otherwise than what it might appear to others. Oh my gosh, I can't. This is so batshit crazy. It's hard to read. I have to start that over. Hold on, let me start that over. Oh, I know, exclaimed Alice, who had not attended to this last remark. It's a vegetable. It doesn't look like one, but it is. I quite agree with you, said the Duchess. And the moral of that is, be what you would seem to be, or if you'd like it put more simply, never imagine yourself not to be otherwise than what it might appear to others, that what you were or might have been was not otherwise than what you had been would have appeared to them to be otherwise. Can you read that faster than that? That's like a tongue twister.
No, I cannot.
That doesn't even make any sense.
Well, I think Alice is about to tell her that. It's like, what?
I think I should understand that better, Alice said very politely, if I had written it down. But I can't quite follow it as you say it. Me either, Alice. That's nothing to what I would say if I chose, the Duchess replied in a pleased tone.
I wonder if that's I wonder if that's true. You know how people are like, you know, when you're like playing Trivial Pursuit, you and I will be playing like on the show or something, and you'll be like, I just need to read the card.
Yeah.
Like, I just read it to you word for word. Mm-hmm. But your brain just doesn't process it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like me listening to that without reading it. I was just like...
Me reading it is like I can't even.
I don't really know what that says.
I'm like looking at the words and none of them go together. And it's like making my head spin a little bit. I'm not a good...
I guess now we can know what Alice feels like.
I'm not a good reader anyway, and this is like scrambling my brain. So she says, I'm going to read that last part again. I think I should understand that better, Alice said very politely, if I had written it down. But I can't quite follow it as you say it. That's nothing to what I would say if I chose, the Duchess replied in a very pleased tone. Pray don't trouble yourself to say it any longer than that, said Alice. Oh, don't talk about trouble, said the Duchess. I make you a present of everything I've said as yet. A cheap sort of present, thought Alice. I'm glad people don't give birthday presents like that. But she did not venture to say it aloud. Thinking again? The Duchess asked, with another dig of her sharp little chin.
Ooh.
I have a right to think.
Is she sitting there like
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
I have a right to think, said Alice sharply, for she was beginning to feel a little worried. Just about as much right, said the Duchess, as pigs have to fly, and it tapers off. It's like a M sound. But here, to Alice's great surprise, the Duchess's voice died away, even in the middle of her favorite word, moral, and the arm that was linked into hers began to tremble. And Alice looked up, and there stood the Queen in front of them, with her arms folded, frowning like a thunderstorm.
Oh.
A fine day, Your Majesty, the Duchess began in a low, weak voice. Now I give you fair warning, shouted the Queen, stamping on the ground as she spoke.
Stomping her feet again.
Either you or your head must be off. And that in about half no time. Take your choice. The Duchess took her choice and was gone in a moment. Let's go on with the game, the Queen said to Alice. And Alice was too much frightened to say a word, but slowly followed her back to the croquet ground.
Yikes.
The other guests had
how did she get off the croquet ground anyway?
She was following around all those little hedgehog things everywhere. Those little critters that were the balls. They were everywhere. And then she ran into this damn Duchess again.
That's right.
And here comes the Queen, and she's like, what the hell are you doing? We were in the middle of something. Poor Alice is scared to death.
I can't see the Queen as anything but Helena Bonham Carter.
Oh, yeah. The other guests had taken advantage of the Queen's absence and were resting in the shade. However, the moment they saw her, they hurried back to the game, the Queen merely remarking that a moment's delay would cost them their lives. All the time they were playing, the Queen never left. All the time they were playing, the Queen never left off quarreling with the other players and shouting, "Off with his head," or "Off with her head." Those whom she sentenced were taken into custody by the soldiers, who of course had to leave off being arches to do this, so that by the end of half an hour or so, there were no arches left.
The soldiers are like...
Yeah, they're the little croquet arches.
Yeah, they put themselves all over the croquet arch.
Those whom she sentenced were taken into custody by the soldiers, who of course had to leave off being arches to do this, so that by the end of half an hour or so, there were no arches left, and all the players except the King, the Queen, and Alice were in custody under sentence of execution.
God.
Then the Queen left off, quite out of breath, and said to Alice, "Have you seen the mock turtle yet?" "No," Alice said. "I don't even know what a mock turtle is." "It's the thing mock turtle soup is made from," said the Queen. I never saw one or heard of one, said Alice. Come on, then, said the queen, and he shall tell you his history. As they walked off together, Alice heard the king say in a low voice to the company generally, You are all pardoned. Come, that's a good thing, she said to herself, for she had felt quite unhappy at the number of executions the queen had ordered. They very soon came upon a griffin, lying fast asleep in the sun. If you don't know what a griffin is, look at the picture. There is the picture.
So the queen has made up this... It's ridiculous. Another play on words. Mock turtle, of course, is not a real species of turtle. It's just like mock turtle soup is like fake turtle soup. So there can't be a mock turtle.
Yeah.
Funny.
Up, lazy thing, said the queen, and take this young lady to see the mock turtle and to hear his history. I must go back and see after some executions I have ordered. And she walked off, leaving Alice alone with the griffin. Alice did not quite like the look of the creature, but on the whole, she thought it would be quite as safe to stay with it as to go after that savage queen, so she waited.
Yeah, no kidding.
The griffin sat up and rubbed its eyes.
Take my chances with the griffin.
Then it watched the queen till she was out of sight, and then it chuckled. What fun, said the griffin, half to itself, half to Alice. What is the fun, said Alice. Why, she, said the griffin. It's all her fancy that they never execute nobody, you know. Come on. Everybody says, come on, here, thought Alice, as she went slowly after it. I never was so ordered about before in all my life. Never. They had not gone far before they saw the mock turtle in the distance, sitting sad and lonely on a little ledge of rock. And as they came nearer, Alice could hear him sighing, as if his heart would break. She pitied him deeply. What is his sorrow? She asked the griffin, and the griffin answered, very nearly in the same words as before. It's all his fancy that he hasn't got no sorrow, you know. Come on. So they went up to the mock turtle, who looked at them with large eyes full of tears, but said nothing. This here young lady, said the griffin, she wants for to know your history, she do. I'll tell it to her, said the mock turtle in a deep, hollow tone. Sit down, both of you, and don't speak a word till I've finished. Bossy. So they sat down and nobody spoke.
But he's so sad.
So they sat down and nobody spoke for some minutes. Alice thought to herself, I don't see how he can ever finish if he doesn't begin. But she waited patiently. Once, said the mock turtle at last with a deep sigh, I was a real turtle. These words were followed by a very long silence, broken only by an occasional explanation of from the griffin, and the constant heavy sobbing of the mock turtle. Alice was very nearly getting up to say, Thank you, sir, for your interesting story, but she could not help thinking that there must be more to come, so she sat still and said nothing. When we were little, the mock turtle went on at last, more calmly, though still sobbing a little now and then. We went to school in the sea, and the master was an old turtle. We used to call him Tortoise. Why did you call him Tortoise if he wasn't one? Said Alice. We called him Tortoise because he taught us. And the mock turtle said angrily. Really, you are very dull. You ought to be ashamed of yourself for asking such simple question, added the griffin. And they both sat silent and looked upon poor Alice, who felt ready to sink into the earth. At last the griffin said to the mock turtle, Drive on, old fellow. Don't be all day about it. And he went on with these words. Yes, we went to school in the sea, though you may not believe it. I never said I didn't, Alice said, interrupted. You did, said the mock turtle. Hold your tongue, added the griffin. Before Alice could speak again, the mock turtle went on. We had the best of educations. In fact, we went to school every day. I've been to school a day too, said Alice. You needn't be so proud of all that. With extras? Asked the turtle, a little anxious. Yes, we learned French and music. And washing? Asked the turtle. Washing? Certainly not, said Alice indignantly.
Washing?
Ah, then yours wasn't really a good school, said the Mock Turtle in a tone of great relief. Now at ours, they had at the end of the bill French, music, and washing extra. You couldn't have wanted it much, said Alice, living at the bottom of the sea. I couldn't afford to learn it, said the Mock Turtle with a sigh. I only took the regular course. What was that? Inquired Alice. Reeling and writhing, of course, to begin with, the Mock Turtle replied, and then the different branches of arithmetic, ambidiction, distraction, uglification, and derision, I think are those words. I've never heard of uglification, Alice ventured to say. What is it? The griffin lifted up on its paws in surprise. Never heard of uglifying, it exclaimed. You know what to beautify is, I suppose. Yes, Alice said doubtfully. It means to make anything prettier. Well then, the griffin went on, if you don't know what uglify is, you are a simpleton. Alice did not feel encouraged to ask any more questions about it, so she turned to the Mock Turtle and said, what else had you to learn? Well, there was a mystery, the Mock Turtle replied, counting off the subjects on his flappers. Mystery, ancient and modern, with seaography, then drawling. The drawling master was an old conger eel that used to come once a week. He taught us drawing, sketching, and fainting in coils. What was that like? Asked Alice. Well, I can't show it to you myself, the Mock Turtle said. I'm too stiff, and the griffin never learnt it. Hadn't time, said the griffin. I went to the classical master, though. He was an old crab, he was. I never went to...
What are they talking about?
I don't know.
I don't understand.
I never went...
Like they went to school
Yeah.
somewhere together?
Yeah, in the
At
sea.
the bottom of the ocean?
Yeah. Keep up, Laura. I never went to him, the Mock Turtle said with a sigh. He taught laughing and grief, they used to say. Ah, so he did, said the griffin, sighing in his turn. And both creatures hid their face in their paws. And how many hours a day did you do lessons? Said Alice in a hurry to change the subject. 10 hours the first day, said the Mock Turtle, 9 the next, and so on. What a curious plan, exclaimed Alice. That's the reason they're called lessons, the griffin remarked, because they're lesson from day to day.
Another play on words.
It was quite a new idea to Alice, and she thought it over a little before she made her next remark. Then the 11th day must have been a holiday. Of course it was, said the Mock Turtle. And how did you manage on the 12th? Alice went on eagerly. That's enough about lessons, said the griffin, interrupted in a very decided tone. Tell her something about the games now. And that is the end of that chapter.
Oh.
So I'm going to let you go. From here, Jamie says, how did this get published?
Right?
Agree. This is just batshit bananas.
So, would you pronounce it the lobster quadrille
Let's see.
or quadrille?
I would say quadrille, but for you guys listening, it's Quadrille.
I think it's quadrille.
Nikki thinks it's quadrille.
Okay.
Oh, there's a lobster in this chapter, Nikki.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
This is Nikki's favorite chapter.
This one's short. And then, who stole the tarts? That's the real question.
Yeah.
Oh, there's several chapters.
Oh, there's
'cause these
more.
are short.
There's more left than I realized. Well,
because these are short.
yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get there. This is batshit bananas. Batshit bananas.
Okay.
Give us a thumbs up because this is hard to read. This is not a kid's book, by the way.
Yeah. I've never liked this story.
Frank,
I've never enjoyed it. I never enjoyed the movie.
Little Frank was hard to read because the language was so romantic and the words were huge and a lot of it was really difficult for me to read. This is difficult to read in that the words don't go together like they're supposed to. And so that's really hard to like read aloud, especially.
Yeah.
Go on. Chapter 10.
The Lobster Quadrille. The mock turtle sighed deeply and drew the back of one flapper across his eyes.
1 second. Cheryl says, I did a good amount of coke back in the day. I guess that's why this all makes perfect sense to me.
Would you bleep Cheryl for me, please? Oh my God. Okay. It says, okay, the mock turtle sighed deeply.
I hate the mock turtle.
He drew the back of one flapper across his eyes. He looked at Alice and tried to speak, but for a minute or two, sobs choked his voice. Same as if he had a bone in his throat, said the griffin, and it set to work shaking him and punching him in the back.
Good grief.
Where did that come from? So now...
Yikes. These people are just the worst.
At last, the mock turtle recovered his voice, and with tears running down his cheeks...
Maybe he was like trying to get him to clear up.
Straighten up, man.
Get it together.
At last, the mock turtle recovered his voice, and with tears running down his cheeks, he went on again. You may not have lived much under the sea. I haven't, said Alice. And perhaps you were never even introduced to a lobster. Alice began to say, I once tasted...
Oh,
but checked herself hastily and
don't
said...
talk about that.
Checked herself and said, no, never. So you have no idea...
She's learning.
Yeah,
she's getting better.
She's getting better. So you have no idea what a delightful thing a lobster quadrille is. No, indeed, said Alice. What sort of a dance is it? Why, said the griffin, you first form into a line along the seashore. 2 lines, cried the mock turtle. Sea turtle, seals, turtles, salmon, and so on. Then once you've cleared all the jellyfish out of the way, that generally takes some time, interrupted the griffin. You advance twice, each with a lobster as a partner, cried the griffin. Of course, the mock turtle said. Advance twice, set to partners. Change lobsters and retire in the same order, continued the griffin. Then, you know, the mock turtle went on, you throw the lobsters, shouted the griffin with a bound into the air, as far out to the sea as you can. Swim after them, screamed the griffin.
Good grief.
What is happening? What's going on? I'm like you. It's really hard to read aloud. You don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
So you don't know what tone of voice to use.
Correct.
They seem happy about something and then it's off with their heads and something else.
Yeah.
And they're beating each other or like turning into a pig. Turn a somersault in the sea, cried the mock turtle, capering wildly about. So he was totally depressed and now he's capering wildly about?
Yeah.
Capering.
Yeah. Maybe he's bipolar.
Change
Oh, wait, just saying. Colleen says Lewis Carroll took laudanum for his migraines. Thoughts are that the medicine and or his migraines explained his visions. Maybe so. Hey, Nancy Smith.
Change lobsters again, yelled the griffin at the top of his voice. Back to land again, and that's all the first figure, said the mock turtle, suddenly dropping his voice. And
what does that mean, change lobsters again?
They're changing partners like a square dance.
And then they're just throwing them into the sea?
They're swimming after them and then changing partners and bringing them back.
Okay.
Okay. And the 2 creatures who had been jumping about like mad things all this time sat down again very sadly and quietly and looked at Alice. So they were... Oh my God. It must be a very pretty dance, said Alice timidly. Would you like to see a little of it? said the Mock Turtle. Oh, very much indeed, said Alice. Come, let's try the first figure, said the Mock Turtle to the Griffin. We can do it without the lobsters, you know. Which shall sing? Oh, you sing, said the Griffin. I forgot the words. So they began solemnly dancing around and around Alice, every now and then treading on her toes when they passed too close, and waving their forepaws to mark the time, while the Mock Turtle sang this very slowly and sadly. Well, I'm not going to sing this. But anyway.
I'll sing it.
Oh, great. That's the best thing I've heard all day.
He sings this very slowly and sadly. Will you walk a little faster, said a whiting to a snail. There's a porpoise close behind us, and he's treading on my tail. See how eagerly the lobsters and the turtles all advance. They are waiting on the shingle. Will you come and join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you? Will you join the dance? Will you, won't you? Will you, won't you? Won't you join the dance? You can really have no notion how delightful it will be when they take us up and throw us with the lobsters out to sea. But the snail replied, too far, and gave a look askance. Said he thanked the whiting kindly, but he would not join the dance. Would not, could not, would not, could not, would not join the dance.
It sounds like
would
a Garth
not,
Brooks
could
song.
not, would not, could not join the dance. What matters it how far we go, his scaly friend replied. There is another shore, you know, upon the other side. The further off from England, the nearer is to France. Then turn not pale, beloved snail, but come and join the dance. Will you, won't you? Will you, won't
will
you?
you, won't you?
Will you join the dance? Will you, won't you? Will you, won't you? Won't you join the dance?
Oh, that's so serious. Oh, my God. You're gorgeous. You just need a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very interesting dance to watch, said Alice, feeling very glad that it was over at last. And I do like that curious song about the whiting. Oh, as to the whiting, said the Mock Turtle, you've seen them, of course. Yes, said Alice. I've often seen them at dinner. She checked herself hastily. I don't know where din may be, said the Mock Turtle, but if you've seen them so often, of course you know what they're like.
I'm so glad that she's finally not being like, oh yeah, I love to eat lobsters. I love to eat mock turtles.
I believe so, Alice replied thoughtfully. They have their little tails in their mouths, and they're all over crumbs. You're wrong about the crumbs, said the Mock Turtle. Crumbs would all wash off in the sea. But they have their little tails in their mouths. And the reason is... Here the Mock Turtle yawned and shut his eyes. Tell her about the reason and all that, he said to the Griffin. The reason is, said the Griffin, that they would go with the lobsters to the dance. So they got thrown out to sea. So they had to fall a long way. So they got their tails fast in their mouths so they couldn't get them out again. That's all. Thank you, said Alice. It's very interesting. I never knew so much about a whiting before.
What is a whiting?
I don't know. Is that a fish?
I don't know, I'm looking it up.
I can tell you more than that if you like, said the Griffin. Do you know why it's called a whiting? I never thought about it, said Alice. Why? It does the boots.
It's a type of fish. A whiting is a small, soft, and sweet fish that is a member of the cod family.
Okay. So now the Griffin says, do you know why it's called a whiting? And she said, I never thought about it, said Alice. Why? It does the boots and shoes, the Griffin replied very solemnly. Alice was thoroughly puzzled. Does the boots and shoes? She repeated in a wondering tone. Why, what are your shoes done with? Said the Griffin. I mean, what makes them so shiny? Alice looked down at them and considered a little before she gave her answer. They're done with blacking, I believe. So that's what he's talking about.
Clever.
Boots and shoes under the sea, the Griffin went on in a deep voice, are done with whiting, not blacking. Now you know. And what are they made of? Alice asked in a tone of great curiosity. Soles and eels, of course, the Griffin replied rather impatiently. Any shrimp could have told you that. If I'd been the whiting, said Alice, whose thoughts were still running on the song, I'd have said to the porpoise, keep back, please. We don't want you with us. They were obliged to have him with them, the Mock Turtle said. No wise fish would go anywhere without a porpoise. Wouldn't it really? Said Alice in a tone of great surprise. Of course not, said the Mock Turtle. Why, if a fish came to me and told me he was going on a journey, I would say, with what porpoise?
Oh my gosh.
Don't you mean purpose? Said Alice. So this is the first time, really, I think that Alice has called him out on it. Mm-hmm. I mean what I say, the Mock Turtle replied in an offended tone, and the Griffin added, come, let's hear some of your adventures. I could tell you my adventures, beginning from this morning, said Alice a little timidly, but it's no use going back to yesterday because I was a different person then. Explain all that, said the Mock Turtle. No, the adventures first, said the Griffin in an impatient tone. Explanations take such a dreadful time. So Alice began telling them her adventures from the time when she first saw the white rabbit. She was a little nervous about it, just at first. The two creatures got so close to her, one on each side, and opened their eyes and mouths so very wide. But she gained courage as she went on. Her listeners were perfectly quiet till she got to the part about her repeating, you are old, Father William, to the caterpillar. And the words all coming different, and then the Mock Turtle drew a long breath and said, that's very curious. It's all about as curious as it can be, said the Griffin. It all came different, the Mock Turtle repeated thoughtfully. I should like to hear her try and repeat something now. Tell her to begin. He looked at the Griffin as if he thought he had some kind of authority over Alice. Stand up and repeat, 'tis the voice of the sluggard, said the Griffin. How the creatures order one about and make one repeat lessons, thought Alice. I might just as well be at school at once. However, she got up and began to repeat it, but her head was so full of the lobster quadrille that she hardly knew what she was saying, and the words came very queer indeed. 'Tis the voice of the lobster, I heard him declare. You have baked me too brown. I must sugar my hair. As a duck with its eyelids, so he with his nose trims his belt and his buttons and turns out his toes. Gosh. When the sands are all dry, he is gay as a lark and will talk in contemptuous tones of the shark. But when the tide rises and sharks are around, his voice has a timid and tremulous sound. That's different from what I used to say when I was a child, said the Griffin. Well, I never heard it before, said the Mock Turtle, but it sounds uncommon nonsense. Oh my God. Alice said nothing. She had sat down with her face in her hands, wondering if anything would ever happen in a natural way again. I should like to have it explained, said the Mock Turtle. She can't explain it, said the Griffin hastily. Go on with the next verse. But about his toes, the Mock Turtle persisted. How could he turn them out with his nose, you know? It's the first position in dancing, Alice said, but she was dreadfully puzzled by the whole thing and longed to change the subject. Go on with the next verse, the Griffin repeated. It begins, I passed by his garden. Alice did not dare to disobey, though she felt sure it would all come wrong, and she went on in a trembling voice. I passed by his garden and marked with one eye how the owl and the panther were sharing a pie. The panther took pie crust and gravy and meat, while the owl had the dish as its share of the treat. When the pie was all finished, the owl, as a boon, was kindly permitted to pocket the spoon, while the panther received knife and fork with a growl, and concluded the banquet by... "What is the use of repeating all that stuff?" the Mock Turtle interrupted, "if you don't explain it as you go on? It's by far the most confusing thing I ever heard." Yes, I think you'd better leave off," said the Gryphon, and Alice was only too glad to do so. "Shall we try another figure of the lobster quadrille?" the Gryphon went on, "or would you like the Mock Turtle to sing you another song?" "Oh, a song, please, if the Mock Turtle would be so kind," Alice replied. Alice replied so eagerly that the Gryphon said in a rather offended tone, "No accounting for taste. Sing her turtle soup, will you, old fellow?" The Mock Turtle sighed deeply and began in a voice choked with sobs to sing this. Are you going to sing again?
Sure. I didn't really sing it the first time, but... Beautiful soup, so rich and green, waiting in a hot tureen. Who for such dainties would not stoop? Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Soup of the evening. Beautiful, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, who cares for fish, game, or any other dish? Who would give not all else for 2p any worth? It's like separated p, any worth. Only of beautiful soup, pennyworth only of beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Soup of the evening. Beautiful, beautiful soup.
Oh, so funny. Okay. "Chorus again," cried the Gryphon. And the Mock Turtle had just begun to repeat it when a cry of, "The trial's beginning," was heard in the distance. "Come on," cried the Gryphon, and taking Alice by the hand, it hurried off without waiting for the end of the song. "What trial is it?" Alice panted as she ran, but the Gryphon only answered, "Come on," and ran the faster, while more and more faintly came carried on the breeze that followed them the melancholy words, "Soup of the evening. Beautiful, beautiful soup." Okay.
Oh my gosh, this is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
Chapter 11. Who stole the tarts?
Amy said, "I'll never be able to say soup the same."
Same. All right, here we go. Who stole the tarts? The King and Queen of Hearts were seated on their throne when they arrived, with the great crowd assembled about them. All sorts of little birds and beasts, as well as the whole pack of cards. The knave was standing before them in chains, with a soldier on each side to guard him. And near the king was the white rabbit, with a trumpet in one hand and a scroll of parchment in the other. In the very middle of the court was a table with a large dish of tarts upon it. They looked so good that it made Alice quite hungry to look at them. She's always hungry.
I'm still standing by my idea that somebody should open a bakery called Wonderland and make the tarts and make all the treats and say, "Eat me and drink me," and all that stuff.
In the middle of the court was a table with a large dish of tarts upon it. They looked so good that it made Alice quite hungry to look at them. I wish they'd get the trial done, she thought, and hand around the refreshments. But there seemed to be no chance of this, so she began looking at everything about her to pass away the time. Alice had never been in a court of justice before, but she had read about them in books, and she was quite pleased to find that she knew the name of nearly everything there. That's the judge, she said to herself, because of his great wig. The judge, by the way, was the king, and as he wore his crown over the wig, look at the front piece if you want to see how he did it. Is there a photo? No, there's not. Or a picture. He did not look at all comfortable, and it was certainly not becoming. And that's the jury box, thought Alice. And those 12 creatures, she was obliged to say creatures, you see, because some of them were animals and some were birds.
Oh, I bet that was quite a scene.
I suppose they are the jurors. Just as she said the last word 2 or 3 times over to herself, being rather proud of it, for she thought, and rightly too, that very few little girls of her age knew the meaning of it at all. However, jurymen would have done just as well. The 12 jurors were all writing very busily on slates. "What are they doing?" whispered Alice to the Griffin. "They can't have anything to put down yet before the trial's begun."
They're all sitting there just furiously taking notes on nothing.
"They're putting down their names," said the Griffin, whispered in reply, for fear they should forget them before the end of the trial. "Stupid things," Alice began in a loud, indignant voice, but she stopped herself hastily, for the White Rabbit cried out, "Silence in the court!" And the king put on his spectacles and looked anxiously around to see who was talking.
You know what? Alice has Martha Stewart energy.
Yeah.
Like, stupid things. That's stupid. She doesn't know it all.
Alice could see, as well as if she were looking over their shoulders, that all the jurors were writing down stupid things on their slates. They heard her. And she could even make out that one of them didn't know how to spell stupid, and that it had to ask his neighbor how to tell him. A nice muddle in their slates will be... this is hard. I'm a little drunk. A nice muddle in their slates will be in before the trial's over, thought Alice. One of the jurors had a pencil that squeaked. This, of course, Alice could not stand. And she went...
That's you.
Yeah, and she went around the court and got behind him and stood, and very soon found an opportunity of taking it away. How did she do that? She just went and took its pen away? Like, who does she think she is?
Up there.
Yeah.
I'll have that. Thank you very much. You're driving me
she
crazy.
Went and got behind him and took it away. She did it so quickly that the poor little juror, it was Bill, the lizard. Poor Bill, he was shot out of the damn house earlier.
Was he?
Yeah.
Is he the same one?
Yeah. They tried to push him down the chimney and she shot him out of there. Poor Bill.
We're all Team Bill now. Bill the lizard.
Team Bill. Let me read that again. She did it so quickly that the poor little juror, it was Bill the lizard, could not make out what at all had become of it. He's looking for his pencil.
We're all going to share the profits in this new bakery idea. The bakery's going to have also, edibles in the brownies and things like that.
Yeah. So after hunting about for it, he was obliged to write with one finger for the rest of the day.
Oh.
And this was of very little use, as it left no mark on the slate.
So poor Bill. She's taking his pen away, and Bill's sitting there trying to write with his finger.
Alice has ruined Bill's life. "Harold, read the accusation," said the king. On this, the White Rabbit blew 3 blasts of his trumpet, and then unrolled the parchment scroll and read as follows. "The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts, all on a summer's day. The Knave of Hearts, he stole those tarts and took them quite away. "Consider your verdict," the king said to the jury. Not yet, the rabbit hastily interrupted. "There's a great deal to come before that." "Call the first witness," said the king, and the white rabbit blew 3 blasts on the trumpet, and he called out, "First witness!" The first witness was the Hatter.
Oh.
He came in with a teacup in one hand and a piece of bread and butter on the other. "I beg pardon, your majesty," he began, "for bringing these in, but I hadn't quite finished my tea when I was sent for." "You ought to have finished," said the king. "When did you begin?" The Hatter looked at the March Hare, who had followed him into the court arm in arm with the Dormouse. 14th of March, I think it was, he said. 15th, said the March Hare. 16th, said the Dormouse. "Write that down," the king said to the jury. And the jury eagerly wrote down all 3 dates on their slate and then added them up.
Anyway.
Added them up
Oh, poor
and
Bill.
reduced the answers to shillings and pence. What the hell?
Poor Bill. Bill didn't get any of that.
"Take off your hat," the king said to the Hatter. "It isn't mine," said the Hatter. "Stolen," the king exclaimed, turning to the jury, who instantly made a memorandum of the fact. "I keep them to sell," the Hatter added as an explanation. "I've none of my own. I'm a Hatter." Here the queen put on her spectacles and began staring hard at the Hatter, who turned pale and fidgeted. "Give your evidence," said the king, "and don't be nervous, or I'll have you executed on the spot." This did not seem to encourage the witness at all. He kept shifting from one foot to the other, looking uneasily at the queen, and in his confusion, he bit a larger piece of his teacup instead of the bread and butter.
Oh, no.
Just at this moment, Alice felt a very curious sensation, which puzzled her a great deal until she made out what it was. She was beginning to grow larger again, and she thought at first that she would get up and leave the court, but on second thought, she decided to remain where she was as long as there was room for her.
What happened? She just spontaneously started doing that?
Growing. "I wish you wouldn't squeeze so," said the Dormouse, who was sitting next to her. "I can hardly breathe." "I can't help it," said Alice very meekly. "I'm growing." "You've got no right to grow here," said the Dormouse. "Don't talk nonsense," said Alice more boldly. "You know you're growing too."
Oh.
"Yes, but I grow at a reasonable pace," said the Dormouse. "Not in that ridiculous fashion." And he got up very sulkily and went over to the other side of the court. All this time,
Lenny said, "I like that mouse."
All this time, the queen had never left off staring at the Hatter, and just as the Dormouse crossed the court, she said to no one of the officers in the court, "Bring me the list of the singers of the last concert." On which the wretched Hatter trembled so that he shook off both of his shoes. "Give your evidence," the king repeated angrily, "or I'll have you executed whether you're nervous or not." "I'm a poor man, your majesty," the Hatter began in a trembling voice.
And I had to get a teacup and make it shake, because that's what I picture when he's doing that.
"I'm a poor man, your majesty," the Hatter began in a trembling voice, "and I hadn't begun my tea, not above a week or so. And with the bread and butter getting thin, and the twinkling of the tea..." "The twinkling of the what?" said the king. "It began with the tea," the Hatter replied. "Of course, twinkling begins with a tea," said the king sharply. "Do you take me for a dunce? Go on." "I'm a poor man," the Hatter went on, "and most things twinkled after that. Only the March Hare said..." "I didn't," the March Hare interrupted in a great hurry. "You did," said the Hatter. "I deny it," said the March Hare. "He denies it," said the king. "Leave out that part." "Well, at any rate, the Dormouse said." The Hatter went on, looking anxiously around to see if he would deny it too, but the Dormouse denied nothing, being fast asleep. "After that," continued the Hatter, "I cut some more bread and butter." "But what did the Dormouse say?" one of the jury asked. "That I can't remember," said the Hatter.
I know, the Mad Hatter is the first witness. He's being questioned by the king.
You must remember, remarked the king, or I'll have you executed. The miserable hatter dropped his teacup and bread and butter and went down on one knee. I'm a poor man, your majesty, he began. You're a very poor speaker, said the king. Here, one of the guinea pigs cheered and was immediately suppressed by one of the officers of the court. As that is a rather hard word, I will just explain to you how it was done. They had a large canvas bag which was tied up at the mouth with strings. Into this, they slipped the guinea pig head first and then sat upon it.
That's just so ridiculously random.
I'm glad I've seen that done, thought Alice. I've so often read it in newspapers. At the end of this trials, there was some attempt at applause, which was immediately suppressed by the officers of the court, and I never understood what that meant until now. If that's all you know about it, you may stand down, continued the king. I can't go any lower, said the hatter. I'm on the floor as it is. Then you may sit down, the king replied. Here the other guinea pig cheered, and it was suppressed. Come, that finishes the guinea pig, thought Alice. We shall get on better. I'd rather finish my tea, said the hatter with an anxious look at the queen, who was reading the list of singers. You may go, said the king, and the hatter hurriedly left the court, even without waiting to put his shoes on. And just take his head off outside, the queen added to one of the officers, but the hatter was out of sight before the officer could get to the door. Call the next witness, said the king. The next witness was the Duchess's cook. She carried the pepper box in her hand, and Alice guessed who it was even before she got into the court. By the way, let me read that again. The next witness was the Duchess's cook. She carried the pepper box in her hand, and Alice guessed who it was even before she got to the court by the way people near the door began sneezing all at once. Give your evidence, said the king. Shan't, said the cook. The king looked anxiously at the White Rabbit, who said in a low voice, Your Majesty must cross-examine this witness. Well, if I must, I must, the king said with a melancholy air, and after folding his arms and frowning at the cook until his eyes were nearly out of sight, he said in a deep voice, What are the tarts made of? Pepper mostly, said the cook.
Oh.
Treacle, said a sleepy voice behind her. Collar that dormouse, the queen shrieked out. Behead that dormouse. Turn that dormouse out of the court. Suppress him. Pinch him. Off with his whiskers.
Oh.
For some minutes, the whole court was in confusion, getting the dormouse turned out. And by the time they had settled down again, the cook had disappeared. Never mind, said the king, and with an air of great relief, call the next witness.
Lenny said, no.
And then he added,
Lenny's team dormouse.
Yes. Never mind, said the king, and with an air of great relief, call the next witness. And he added in an undertone to the queen, really, my dear, you must cross-examine the next witness. It quite makes my forehead ache. Alice watched the White Rabbit as he fumbled over the list, feeling very curious to see what the next witness would be like. For they haven't gotten much evidence yet, she said to herself. Imagine her surprise when the White Rabbit read out at the top of his shrill little voice the name. Alice.
Oh, dear. Katie, Tone TTK says, I think we gave our guinea pig a heart attack by giving it a bath. It died clean.
I believe this is the last chapter. Chapter 12.
Okay. It's called Alice's Evidence. I don't think it bodes well for Alice here. The jury box appears to be all, capering around, as they say that what the mock turtle was doing? Okay. "Here," cried Alice, quite forgetting in the flurry of the moment how large she had grown in the last few minutes, and she jumped up in such a hurry that she tipped over the jury box with the edge of her skirt, upsetting all the jurymen onto the heads of the crowd below. And there they lay, sprawling about, reminding her very much of a globe of goldfish she had accidentally upset the week before. "Oh, I beg your pardon," she exclaimed in a tone of great dismay, and began picking them up again as quickly as she could, for the accident of the goldfish kept running in her head, and she had a vague sort of idea that they must be collected at once and put back into the jury box or they would die. "The trial cannot proceed," said the king in a very grave voice, "until all the jurymen are back in their proper places. All," he repeated with great emphasis, looking hard at Alice as he said so. Alice looked at the jury box and saw that in her haste she had put the lizard in head downwards, and the poor little thing was waving its tail about in a melancholy way, being quite unable to move.
Poor Bill.
She soon got it out again and put it right. "Not that it signifies much," she said to herself. "I should think it would be quite as much use in the trial one way up as the other." As soon as the jury had a little recovered from the shock of being upset, and their slates and pencils had been found and handed back to them, they set to work very diligently to write out a history of the accident, all except the lizard, who seemed too much overcome to do anything but sit with its mouth open, gazing up into the roof of the court.
I'm Team Bill.
"What do you know about this business?" said the king. The king said to Alice. "Nothing," said Alice. "Nothing whatever?" persisted the king. "Nothing whatever," said Alice. "That's very important," the king said, turning to the jury. They were just getting to write this down on their slates when the White Rabbit interrupted. "Unimportant, your majesty means, of course," he said in a very respectful tone, but frowning and making faces at him as he spoke. "Unimportant, of course, I meant," the king hastily said, and went on to himself in an undertone. "Important, unimportant, unimportant, important," as if he were trying which word sounded the best. This book hasn't been read very much. Some of the jury wrote it down, important, and some unimportant. Alice could see this, as she was near enough to look over their slates. But it doesn't matter a bit, she thought to herself. At this moment the king, who had been for some time busily writing in his notebook, called out, "Silence!" and read from his book, "Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high to leave the court." Everybody looked at Alice. "I'm not a mile high," said Alice. "You are," said the king. "Nearly 2 miles high," added the queen. "Well, I shan't go at any rate," said Alice. "Besides, that's not a regular rule. You invented it just now." "It's the oldest rule in the book," said the king. "Then it ought to be number 1, said Alice. The king turned pale and shut his notebook hastily. "Consider your verdict," he said to the jury in a low, trembling voice. "There's more evidence to come yet, please, your majesty," said the White Rabbit, jumping up in a great hurry. "This paper has just been picked up." "What's in it?" said the queen. "I haven't opened it yet," said the White Rabbit, "but it seems to be a letter written by the prisoner to somebody." "It must have been that," said the king, "unless it was written to nobody, which isn't usual, you know." "Who is it directed to?" said one of the jurymen. "It isn't directed at all," said the White Rabbit. "In fact, there's nothing written on the outside." He unfolded the paper as he spoke and added, "It isn't a letter after all, it's a set of verses." "Oh, good. A set of verses." "Are they in the prisoner's handwriting?" asked another of the jurymen. "No, they're not," said the White Rabbit, "and that's the queerest thing about it." The jury all looked puzzled. "He must have imitated somebody else's hand," said the king. The jury all brightened up again. "Please, your majesty," said the knave, "I didn't write it, and they can't prove that I did. There's no name signed at the end." If you didn't sign it, said the king, that only makes the matter worse. You must have meant some mischief, or else you'd have signed your name like an honest man. There was a general clapping of hands at this. It was the first really clever thing the king had said that all day. That proves his guilt, of course, said the queen. So off with... It doesn't prove anything of the sort, said Alice. Why, you don't even know what they're about. Read them, said the king. The White Rabbit put on his spectacles. Where shall I begin, please, your majesty, he asked. Begin at the beginning, the king said very gravely, and go on till you come to the end, then stop. There was dead silence in the court whilst the rabbit read out these verses. You want to read the verses?
If you want me to.
That's okay, I can. They told me you had been to her and mentioned me to him. She gave me a good character, but said I could not swim. He sent them word I had not gone. We know it to be true. If she should push the matter on, what would become of you? I gave her 1, they gave him 2. You gave us 3 or more. They all returned from him to you, though they were mine before. If I or she should chance to be involved in this affair, he trusts to you to set them free exactly as we were.
Interesting. Oh, it keeps going.
Oh, my notion was that you had been, before she had this fit, an obstacle that came between him and ourselves and it. Don't let him know she liked them best, for this must ever be a secret kept from all the rest between yourself and me. That's the most important piece of evidence we've heard yet, said the king, rubbing his hands. So, now let the jury... If any one of them can explain it, said Alice. She had grown so large in the last few minutes that she wasn't a bit afraid of interrupting him. I'll give him a 6pence. I don't believe there's an atom of meaning in it. The jury all wrote down on their slates, she doesn't believe there's an atom of meaning in it. But none of them attempted to explain the paper. If there's no meaning in it, said the king, that saves a world of trouble, you know, as we needn't try to find any. And yet I don't know, he went on, spreading out the verses on his knee and looking at them with one eye. I seem to see some meaning in them after all. Said I could not swim. You can't swim, can you? He added, turning to the knave. The knave shook his head sadly. Do I look like it? He said, which he certainly did not, being made entirely of cardboard. All right so far, said the king, and he went on muttering over the verses to himself. We know it to be true. That's the jury, of course. If she should push the matter on, that must be the queen. What would become of you? What indeed? I gave her 1, they gave him 2. Why, that must be what he did with the tarts, you know. But it goes on. They all returned from him to you, said Alice. Why, there they are, said the king triumphantly, pointing to the tarts on the table. Nothing can be clearer than that. Then again, before she had this fit... You never had fits, my dear, I think, he said to the queen. Never, said the queen, furiously throwing an inkstand at the lizard as she spoke.
Poor Bill.
Oh, poor Bill. The unfortunate little Bill had left off writing on his slate with one finger, as he found it made no mark, but he now hastily began again, using the ink which was trickling down his face as long as it lasted.
Bless him.
Then the words don't fit you, said the king, looking around the court with a smile. There was a dead silence. It's a pun, the king added in an angry tone, and everybody laughed. Let the jury consider their verdict, the king said, for about the 20th time that day. No, no, said the queen. Sentence first, verdict afterwards. Stuff and nonsense, said Alice loudly. The idea of having the sentence first. Hold your tongue, said the queen, turning purple. I won't, said Alice.
I won't hold my tongue.
Off with her head, the queen shouted at the top of her voice, but nobody moved. Who cares for you? said Alice. She had grown to her full size by this time. You're nothing but a pack of cards. At this, the whole pack rose up into the air and came flying down upon her. She gave a little scream, half of fright and half of anger, and tried to beat them off, and found herself lying on the bank with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered down from the trees upon her face. Wake up, Alice, dear, said her sister. Why, what a long sleep you've had. Oh, I've had such a curious dream, said Alice, and she told her sister, as well as she could remember them, all these strange adventures of hers that you have just been reading about. And when she had finished, her sister kissed her and said, It was a curious dream, dear, certainly, but now run into your tea, it's getting late. So Alice got up and ran off, thinking while she ran, as well she might, what a wonderful dream it had been. Was it? Can you guys put the emojis in? Oh, you probably don't have the emojis on this.
No, probably not on here.
Was it? But her sister sat still just as she left her, leaning her head on her hand, watching the setting sun and thinking of little Alice and all her wonderful adventures, till she too began dreaming after a fashion, and this was her dream. First she dreamed about little Alice herself. Once again the tiny hands were clasped upon her knee, and the bright eager eyes were looking up into hers. She could hear the very tones of her voice and see that queer little toss of her head to keep back the wandering hair that would always get into her eyes. And still as she listened, or seemed to listen, the whole place around her became alive with the strange creatures of her little sister's dream. The long grass rustled at her feet as the white rabbit hurried by. The frightened mouse splashed his way through the neighboring pool. She could hear the rattle of the teacups as the March Hare and his friend shared their never-ending meal, and the shrill voice of the queen ordering off with her unfortunate guests to execution. Once more the pig baby was sneezing on the Duchess's knee while plates and dishes crashed around it. Once more the shriek of the griffin, the squeaking of the lizard's slate pencil, and the choking of the suppressed guinea pigs filled the air, mixed up with the distant sob of the miserable mock turtle.
So she's having the same dream?
Well, she's just reminiscing, yeah. So she sat on with closed eyes and half believed herself into Wonderland, though she knew she had but to open them again and all would change to dull reality. The grass would be only rushing in the wind, and the pool rippling to the waving of the reeds. The rattling teacups would change to tinkling sheep's bells, and the queen's shrill cries to the voice of the shepherd boy. And the sneeze of the baby, the shriek of the griffin, and all the other queer noises would change, she knew, to the confused clamor of the busy farmyard, while the lowing of the cattle in the distance would take the place of the mock turtle's heavy sobs. Lastly, she pictured to herself how this same little sister of hers would, in the aftertime, be herself a grown woman, and how she would keep, through all her riper years, the simple and loving heart of her childhood, and how she would gather about her other little children and make their eyes bright and eager with many a strange tale, perhaps even with the dream of Wonderland of long ago, and how she would feel with all their simple sorrows and find a pleasure in all their simple joys, remembering her own child life and the happy summer days.
The end.
The end.
So they're both crazy.
Lucid dreaming.
They are crazy. Crazy, crazy bitches.
Yeah, believe yourself.
Yeah. Man, that was really something.
I mean, I guess there's just, I don't know.
Isn't there a show where like all this stuff happened and then somebody woke up and it was all a dream?
Yes.
What was that show? It was
Bob Newhart.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought Bob Newhart show was like a not a reality show, like a what do you call that? What do you call it?
Sitcom?
No. I
Oh.
thought the Bob Newhart show was like a, what do you call it? Like a blank show, like the Carol Burnett show, like a
Variety
show.
No, it was a show.
It was?
Yeah, it was his life as a psychologist.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And, well, what happened, and then he was married to the same girl the whole show.
Okay.
Then, when the show ended, it was a beloved show. Everybody loved the show, right? So, they go on to make this new show, him and the actor, Bob Newhart and Suzanne Pleshette. And they are husband and wife, but they run at like an inn in Vermont or something. And I forgot the name of it. Yeah, I forgot the name of that show. But that show ran for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
A totally different show. He wasn't Bob Newhart anymore. Mm-hmm. So at the end of that show, she wasn't in that show. Anyway, at the end of that show, he wakes up in bed with Suzanne Pleshette, who was in the Bob Newhart show.
Clever.
And they say, Bob, you're dreaming. It's all a dream. You're
Clever.
dreaming. So,
Clever.
yeah.
I got you.
Evening Shade? No?
There was a shtick
Anyway.
after, so Walter White, what's his name? Bryan Cranston. He was in Malcolm in the Middle before.
Oh, yeah.
So
I'd forgotten that.
there was a shtick that I think he did where he woke up with his wife from Malcolm in the Middle as if Breaking Bad was all a dream.
Oh, yeah. So see that they're copying that.
Yeah,
off
they
of
did
Bob
that.
Newhart.
They did that shtick. I think I'm not making that up. I think I saw that, but that's clever.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, what I'm getting at is, imagine reading this for the first time in your life, and then you get to the end and it's all a dream, and you're like, damn. Are you frustrated when you get to if you didn't know?
Yeah, but I think you realize from the beginning it's a dream.
Do you?
I think so.
I don't know. I think if you read this for the first time in 1865, if you read this for the first time in 1865, are you disappointed when you get to the last page and it's a dream? Reminds me of Lost. Yeah. You get to the end and it's like previously on Lost.
I'm
and then,
laughing at Jamie.
what did she say? Last night I dreamt that Billy Joel was being mauled to death by bears.
And
Great. That's great. So, I think I would be frustrated if I had read this and at the end it's all a dream. I'd be like, great. That's just great.
Oh.
I choose to believe that it's not a dream, that it really happened.
You believe there was cards and
Yep.
talking animal?
Yeah, that's
Bill the lizard.
Yeah, I love Bill. That's what I choose to believe.
And the little dormouse.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was fun. So this book also has
There was another show where
Oh,
Felicity,
really?
where everything was a dream. So
I didn't know
yeah.
that. So, this book also has the Looking Glass, Through the Looking Glass. So we could do that too if you guys are interested. I have never read that.
I don't know.
That
I
part-
don't know what it's about.
Yeah, I don't know what it's about either, but that's a possibility for one of these days if we want to keep going. But we appreciate you guys reading along with us. I feel like that was fun. I love reading these books that I would have never otherwise read before.
Me too.
It's fun. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this as well. There are 45 of you here, and there are 34 thumbs up. So I feel like we could get more if more of you would hit that thumbs up button, and that would be awesome. Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking of, like Dallas or something.
Oh, yes. It's been done a couple of times, but
yeah.
it makes people mad. So
I was thinking MASH.
It's not done super often.
But it was Dallas. I think that's right. And then wasn't there that one thing like where somebody got shot and you didn't know for like a whole season or something who it was?
Dallas.
Yeah.
JR. Who shot JR?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about these things.
No, you were
I
too
just
little.
I just remember hearing about them like
You
it
were
was a
too little.
cultural thing, but whatever. All right, guys. We are going out of here. We're leaving. I'm going to bed. I'm tired. But it's been an awesome night.
Anybody wants to collaborate on the bakery idea, let me know.
What bakery?
The Wonderland.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, guys. I hope you have an awesome rest of your weekend. I hope that you do something fun and hang out and do cool stuff. Give us a like if you watch this later. We would love for you to give us a comment and let us know if you liked this series and maybe what you want to hear next.
Yeah, I'm ready to go on to something that makes sense. Like, I want to, like...
You don't like the nonsense.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
I mean, I
Fair
just
enough.
think that's weird.
Fair enough. That is fair enough.
You know, you guys know, did we talk about it before? Katie told us that the Agatha Christie books just went into the public domain.
That's
So
cool.
that would be fun because it's a mystery.
Yeah, that would be fun.
So the whole time we can be all talking in the chat if nobody reads ahead.
I would like that.
Yeah, we can be talking about who we think did it. and
Okay. That'd be
everything.
fun. I would like that. All right, guys. Have a good weekend. Do something cool. As always, make sure you stay tuned to see what Fatbird finds next. And we'll see you next time.
Good night, everybody.